entitled to talk about Psychometrics Fest. It sounds amazing. I'm actually even turn up. If November the 12th, I probably can't because I've got an event. But otherwise, I'm excited by these things. I need to know more about how the human brain works. So it's exciting stuff. Anyway, welcome everybody to Brain Food Live on Air, bringing it to you every Friday. No fail, never fail. We're on episode 3. The episode count is going all over the place, to be honest with you, but we're definitely over 300 plus, 340, 350, something like that, high level. So brilliant to have everyone with us for another conversation. Today, I'm really excited to have this chat. Reason why is, of course, we do need to know more about how sort of the human brain works, particularly in this era where technology is really shaping human behavior when we're working in groups, when we're working in companies, when we're doing interviews, when we're doing hiring. Do we understand enough about human psychology in order for us to make this work? So, of course, I've got Nikita here with us temporarily off screen, but he'll be back in a minute as we dive into this topic. But before we kick off, let's just first confirm whether the audio and visual is fine. Folks, let me know whether you can hear and see me okay. If you're watching this on Crowdcast, drop me a comment. Let me know whether the audio and visual is fine. We should be broadcasting this on LinkedIn. Let me just quickly check. Yes, I am. Folks, if you're watching this on LinkedIn and you can hear and see me okay, do let me know whether the audio and visual is fine there, because we have had some sticky moments over the last couple of weeks, which has damaged sort of the experience for everyone listening, which is disappointing. Okay, Crowdcast is good. All good, mate. Very, very good. Okay, let's talk about sponsorships, because folks, without sort of companies stepping up every week to sponsor Brain Food Live, we cannot continue to do this show. So I just want to give a quick shout out to all of our sponsors of 2025. Every single week, this show has been sponsored. This week has been one of our favorite sponsors because they've been repeat all the time. It is Bright Hire, of course. Bright Hire, the company really led the way with interview intelligence, but nowadays expanding into all kinds of different recruitment efficiency, recruitment enablement features, including their latest release, Bright Hire Screen. Have you ever seen this? This is a natural evolution of their interview generator. You might be aware, of course, as a company that transcribes sort of intake meetings and transcribes interviews, it's able to accurately predict what sort of questions are actually the right questions to ask to try and evaluate certain skills. They've just taken it to the next level because what they've done is automate the asking of the question. So they've got an AI interviewer that can use sort of these high quality questions and help take the load off the recruiter's plates. First screen interview, I think this is the future. AI interviewing is here. Bright Hire Screen, available for you to try. Just shared the link in the chat stream there. Okay, let's get on with it. Of course, we have Nikita Mikhailov, who had a minor interruption. I assume that was your handler that interrupted and said, okay, Nikita, say this, don't say that. But no, wonderful to see you, sir. For the folks who don't know you, can you quickly introduce yourself? Who are you? What it is you do?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So for this opportunity to be a little bit narcissistic on a Friday afternoon. So my name is Nikita. It'll become painfully clear to you in the next 56 minutes. I'm pretty obsessed by personality and individual differences. You might ask, Nikita, well, how obsessed are you? Well, when I met my partner, my wife-to-be, Olga, what did the first thing I do? I profiled her with 2 psychometric assessments before I proposed. You can't rely on high consequence selection based on one assessment. And better yet, when I was meeting my mentor and my first boss, Wendy, we're having a couple of pints, and she's like, how you doing? And I was like, I think I met the one. She's like, what's her name? And I go, Olga. She goes, show me Olga. So what do? I take her Neo-PIR personality profile, give it to Wendy. She looks at it, puts it down, goes, mate, you totally lost it. I meant a picture. But I go, but that's how I see her. Average neuroticism, high extroversion, low gregariousness, cheeky. But the key thing is, after 10 years of marriage, I can say it's true what they say. Marriage is psychological. One's the psycho and the other one's logical. I'm the psycho of that relationship. So we have a fantastic host to thank for the next 56 minutes.
Complementarity, that is the way. Nikita, you've actually raised something really interesting here, because like when do you deploy the psychometric? We'll get into this topic, by the way. We're talking about candidate experience particularly and the psychology behind that, but this is a good segue. With regards to sort of when you deploy it, because I think most people would agree actually in a relationship it probably makes sense to have some sort of, you know, objective or at least third-party analysis as to how people behave, but like, you don't just deploy that right at the beginning, mate. I mean, there's got to be a time when this is happening.
Maybe second or third date. But as far as when you deploy and what we deploy, because what I'm really want to talk about is actually just you need to use psychometrics as a big grain of salt. They're not really science. They can be scientific at best, but we cannot really kind of claim it's science because it's psychology. Psychology is as much philosophy as anything yet. So for me, what's really important after using psychometrics for well over 12 years, getting qualified in dozens of them, having conversations with quite a few living authors, I can tell you that most, especially personality assessments, probably tell you more about the author's personality than it does about your clients or your candidates. And you need to be aware of how the assessment is developed, when, what purpose. And the more you're informed, the better you can use them, the more value you get. And candidate experience and what we call a psychological contract is absolutely crucial. Like, this is what we have 200 people on this call. And I'm pretty sure, statistically likely, most of you have completed psychometrics in your life, be it selection, development, you name it. But the variability of the invitation email probably goes from like, just do it, or we would like to invite you to get to know you better and your abilities and how you can thrive best in your role. It's really wide ranging. And that bit is usually never covered in any psychometric qualification, which is kind of fun. So what we want to I want to use this space is to actually explore this question, and that we can learn from the 200 people on this call. As far as examples of best practice, we can discuss why it's best practice and also share some horror stories. Because yeah.
No, we do want to see horror stories. Don't folks let me know in the comments. But Nikita, you mentioned something really interesting, because we do have a sort of almost itself a psychological need to reach for something that we think is true, right? Like we have a desperate need for certainty. And it may be that psychometrics or whatever tooling we're using to do assessments, we assume them to be an attempt to get more certain about someone, and we think that therefore is the truth. But what you're saying is actually no, it's a cultural artifact. We've created it, obviously from a psychological space. There was all that agendas in there, and we need to recognize that, because without recognition of it, we're not able to use the information. And the worst thing we can do is assume it's objective, quote unquote, which is not the case.
Yes. And what's going to be really key is what we can do. We can look at history of psychometrics and how assessments came about, both ability and personality, how they're morphing across technology. So going from paper and pencil self-report to digital to now AI enhanced to video interviewing. It's just different sources of data for those models. And we can also discuss how to best roll out those models in a corporate organizational environment, both for selection and development, and how to put in processes where you gradually improve based on feedback you get from your candidates to make the process more inclusive and better. We can also touch upon neurodiversity, diversity and inclusion, and inherent biases built into psychometric assessments because of the way they're made, and what can be done about it. But I'm just really curious to hear from our audience of 200 people, because it's Friday, it's 2:00 UK, it's another Zoom call or LinkedIn. I'm sure you have been on many calls this week, but is there any particular burning questions or something you're really curious to ask about psychometrics today for us to discuss, and about the client experience that would make this hour particularly useful for you? Just pop it in the chat.
No, don't pop it in the chat. Use the system and put it in the Q&A feature. The reason why, by the way, I totally endorse Nikita's position in this. Let's get this crowdsourced, but put it in the Q&A feature so that we can go to it at the end of the show. Otherwise, chat stream, we have a risk we lose it because it just moves up. So there should be a Q&A. Go to the Q&A. Any questions you have on psychology, on this topic, anything else, stick it in there and we'll be in good shape. Let's go to psychological contract, Nikita. Because that immediately tells me that that's the betrayal of this is the root cause of bad candidate experience. Like for whatever reason, when people get annoyed with the candidate experience, it's because there's a perception that they've been ripped off, that is unequal. Again, I'll take the example of the irate candidate. They've applied to a job, maybe not received any response. It's outrageous because it says, "Hey, I've put the effort to apply. Surely you could at least say no." And it's that as ambiguity. But no, you tell me a bit about psychological contract. What's your theory on this? Give it the breakdown, Nikita.
Psychological contract. First step is treat others how you want to be treated. Second step, treat others how they want to be treated. So most people don't even do the first step. They just ghost you. And the key thing with psychometrics and when you invite people to assessments is provision of value and why you're doing this and having a clear explanation. Because if you say you open the job ad and it says, "Welcome to our company where people are our greatest asset, we support you," all of this, you complete 2 hours of assessments and they ghost you. Now that already creates cognitive dissonance. People are greatest asset, then no contact. So the key thing is with psychometrics, when I've seen it done well, first of all, set up, just even whack your job description into ChatGPT and ask which personality traits are we looking for here? Because first of all, it starts at the job description. No, first it starts at the population which will be exposed to your job description, but we'll get onto that. But most job descriptions are rubbish that I ever came across. And most person spec is also out of date. So even if you hire an occupational psychologist and you give them a person spec and a job description to select assessments you're going to pick, they're not particularly great. Having a great sense of humor is not a personality trait. And therefore, actually, is the job description relevant? And how is this created? So, for example, when I work with teams in selection, I will try to always do a team build to create the job description together. So people within that team complete personality assessments. We discuss what's missing. And based on this, we actually write personality traits we'll be looking for. And that can be quite...
Stop press. Really important point. Because a lot of the recruitment problems that we have is because we're trying to bring people into teams, right? And team fit, cultural fit, I know these are bad terms to use, but at the end of the day, if we are looking for someone who's going to be a future collaborator for us, it's very important that we know how they behave in the office or behave at work. Communication style, their own value system, the way in which they deal with conflict, etc., etc. So these things are super important. Now, I guess there's certain jobs where there isn't necessarily a high collaboration intensity. It could just be a solo job, right? This person is literally doing something. Doesn't matter where there's very little interaction with the teammates. I assume that's got to be a different way you could afford to have a different way to recruit that job than a job that's got high collaboration intensity. Because where there's high collaboration intensity, that's in fact where you do need to have input from the people who are going to be collaborating, right? And that doesn't happen because sort of job descriptions are generated typically by recruiters who may be completely divorced from the team, right? Big corporate, is the team involved in creating the job description? No, you're told as a recruiter to create the job description. So you go ahead and do it with no context as to who actually is in team.
Exactly. And then you go to the assessment department and they go, "This is the assessments we use for recruitment." And they go, "Is this relevant to the job?" Should be. And yeah, there's lots of factors at play. And I completely echo this. Some jobs, let's say if you recruit for bus drivers work by themselves. They need to interact with passengers. It's a complex job. However, you can roll out, let's say, get 300 bus drivers in the company, get 60 who are really good, 60 who are not that good, most in the middle, profile them up to their guilds and different psychometrics, test of attention, personality, etc. Identify what's correlated with performance, and then use that to inform the selection process accordingly. Pick the assessments which are most predictive, yada, yada, yada. However, if you're recruiting for somebody, let's say a managerial position, or even as a part of a sales team, psychometric companies love sales teams because they have a very clear KPI, amount of sales to your name. However, the issue is that maybe you'll start to selecting like low agreeable extroverts who just take credit for other people's work. That's why their KPI is higher, and then you started hiring them in. Another key issue, those personality traits, even if you find, let's say, extroverts do better, but they do better while there's diversity of personality around them. But if you start hiring for that particular traits, you start actually getting kind of a monoculture of personality within your team. And that actually might be too much of a good thing, kind of say. We don't know what's going to be the consequence of that. Another key issue is right now, with the world changing the way it is, even if you go out, profile for your particular job with a psychometric, you find correlations with performance. That's based on past data. And necessarily what correlated with performance in the last 10 years is not what's going to correlate with performance in the next 10 years, because the demands of the role, tech, everything has changed. So right now, all the data that we have on personality and performance at work, or even on ability, is going to be pre-AI and LLMs. We're only going to be hiring now for actually jobs when people actively use LLMs. So what the effect of this? We only know that those personality or ability traits were pre-LLM. Now we need to gather that data. It's just what I'm advocating for. You need constant gathering of data if you're going to be rolling out psychometrics on a large scale. It doesn't matter if it was correlated with performance 10 years ago necessarily. So make sure whatever assessments you use, you have continuous data gathering put in place.
Yeah, really good point. I think that's part of the problem, isn't it? Where we have a sort of a sense, because it is hard work. Let's say I'm doing the old school interviewing and I'm just like doing interviews, and that's my approach. But then I think, hang on, no, I want to make sure there's more science, quote unquote, in what we're doing, or we want to have different data points. We implement some solution, and that takes work to do that. And then the realization is the work isn't finished once you've implemented a solution. You've got to keep going with it. And that all together seems like a huge amount of effort. Okay, let's talk about keep this on the candidate experience track a little bit on this. Why is the job search generally considered to be just a horrible experience? Because it's not just the recruiter's fault, Nikita. I mean, I know we like to say, "Oh, recruiter bad," but in reality, job search is miserable. Like looking for a house is miserable. Or there's certain moments in life are just really, really tough. So what are the psychological conditions that make the job search hard? Why is it a stressful experience? Can you dumb it down for us?
Well, so couple of things. First, public service announcement. How do you know that a popular psychology article or theory is likely to be rubbish? It will start with the following line: psychologists agree. Psychologists don't agree on anything. So I can give you some opinions of mine. Other psychologists can give you other opinions, though my background is more psychometrics than general psychology. But what's also really key is there's a difference when a psychologist writes an article about well-being and non-psychologists write an article about well-being, because a psychologist article about well-being will always start with the word subjective well-being. So we're all finding different stuff stressful. We all find different stuff recharging, whether you're out of a job or in a job while you're searching for the next job can make a difference. Level of ambiguity in the current workforce, what's portrayed in the news. There's a lot of stress. Like, I don't want to be a graduate right now, because the last week every news channel I looked at, like, all graduate jobs are outsourced to AI. Like, that is terrifying. That combined with the rubbishness of most career services at universities would stress the heck out of students. And another key things that I find people make an issue with, they don't see the application process as an opportunity to find out about the company and the next job. Like,
well, it's not though, is it? It's a hurdle. I mean, it's basically an assault course. There's a term in the UK, Theresa May, she coined it hostile environment. And I think the application process is pretty hostile, right? It's like you're asking me to do not only just apply, but there's a bunch of things I have to get through. Assessments you talked about earlier. Now there's an AI interviewer we talked about just now. I mean, there's all kinds of, it seems like I've got to negotiate a bunch of trials to get through it. So I can actually understand, why am I subjecting myself to this? This is like high stress. Like I'm going through a series of assessments with no sort of information, low information, and no ROI, like no guaranteed return, right?
So yeah, if your personality is inclined toward ambiguity and stress, you might enjoy it. But if your personality, you want more certainty, predictability, explaining, not so much. I think this is what's also really interesting. If you track the diversity measures across your selection process, and you notice at which point the diversity reduces. So if you, for example, there's a good couple of months, there's a meetup by my colleague called Ben Williams of Stan 10. He runs a thing called Assessment Agony Uncle. So people basically working in psychometrics and assessment, we meet up and we just complain. Like, what are we not happy with and what can we do instead? And he was telling a very nice story that they found that when Assessment Link came out, they had very diverse applicant pool. So hitting all diversity quotas they wanted. Fabulous. Advertised in the right places, right wording of the job description, everything. Fantastic. But they found all that diversity disappears once the link goes out to complete assessments. People who start and complete assessments are from, let's say, a much narrower range of demographics. And they actually looked at the invitation and it was really inhuman. So they actually worked on the invitation and to make it more inclusive, etc. And after working this, they kind of tweaked it continuously until they didn't get the drop off on diversity measures.
Was it all on the invitation, Nikita?
Yes,
rather than the test. Yeah.
It was, they found that pinch point, which was the invitation to complete the assessments. Not even assessments themselves. Most people didn't start them, but it was just how that was worded. And this is what I feel.
On that thing, there's step number one, folks. I know this is like a really interesting conversation. It's going to be a fascinating one. But if you have a pen and notepad to hand, that's your first point you should put down. Basically, your invitation, your communication of the assessment itself has a huge impact as to whether you're going to convert anybody to do it. And it seems like different demographics respond different ways. I assume, can you tell us a little bit about those demographics, Nikita? Like, how granular did you go? I'm assuming there's probably gender in there. Maybe there was age as well, or whatever it is. Like who tends to complete, who tends to drop away?
Well, it will depend on the case, but in this case, you better ask Ben Williams, as he was involved in the project. But the way he explained it, it also, the invitation had an impact on how well people performed.
Second point. So number one, you've got to have the right type of invitation. And we don't know what that is right now, because it could be you have to customize every single invite. It could be that you need to have a different style of invitation. I mean, it'd be great to have a template to see what worked and what didn't.
Absolutely. But Michael, you pointed out that you've seen this firsthand. So in this case, because it's not a question, we can hopefully use the chat. If people can just type in what they have seen to be actually good as far as invitations to complete assessments. As I mentioned, the first step is to treat others as you want to be treated. So actually, what sort of stuff you have seen, either being invited or completing else, such as lack of stress, lack of, you know what the Freudian slip is when you mention one thing, but you mean your mother, I mean another. But as Michael said, it's a lack of details provided that causes the stress. So yes, explain why is it being done?
More explanation, right? Without like hammering people wall of text, but number one, explain why you're doing it. What you hope to get out of it, and what you hope the other person needs to go through. Like, what is the time commitment? Why it's useful for them to do so? I guess it's all about, right fit to job and so on. And those types of things. And I guess we don't know this on the UX side, but there's probably like things like formatting and like, are you using first name addressal, or is it an obvious mass mail merge? Those types of things have a huge impact. So, okay, very interesting. Second point, sorry, go ahead, Nikita.
Oh, and my little trick, write the instructions for the person who is most likely to be resistant and unengaged. Because quite often we write it to who's going to be the most keen. I'll give you a quick example. This was a development scenario. We were working with 100 plus engineers, and HR said, we don't care what assessment you use. I go, why not? It's good because they never complete them anyways. They don't care. Send whatever you want. They're not going to do it. I'm like, okay, challenge accepted. So we had their leadership team complete the assessments, feedbacks, coaching, all of this, which then they introduced in their next town hall. Before the link went out to complete the assessments, we had a Q&A, and you got to love a standard distribution. So whatever you do, 16% will love it, 16% will hate it, most are in the middle. The key thing is engage with the 16% that will hate it first. Because if you don't engage with them, they'll get more people from the middle on their side.
They'll start recruiting people into the hater group.
Exactly. So get a space for them to get together. So we had this open Q&A, and people were like, are you going to sell our data and stuff like that? And so we're just really like, and we addressed every question, but better yet, we recorded those questions who were particularly salient. And when the email went out for people to complete, we included those questions as a Q&A afterwards in the email. So we engaged with the most resistant skeptical, because skepticism is a form of engagement. It's the question how you deal with it that's really key.
Right, that's a really good point. Skepticism, a form of engagement, absolutely. If they were truly unengaged, they would just ignore it. It would like they wouldn't spend any time whatsoever. But the fact that they're critical or they've got opinions to share where they're denigrating the process actually means they are engaged. They care.
Absolutely. And because, as you mentioned, it's a hostile environment, what the key thing you're dealing with is a negative experience people had before, which has nothing to do with you. So when you're sending out those assessments, people might have been ghosted before. So make sure you say your results will be shared with you. You know,
you're never going to be ghosted. Would you even say that? Like, could you like immediately preemptively deal with it to say, hey, listen, we don't believe in ghosting. We guarantee you a response in 24 hours or whatever it's suitable. It's sort of the time it takes to process the return. Maybe that communication should be right up front, so that you just preemptively answer the question, so to say.
Exactly. You can even go to ChatGPT, write down what is the most often criticisms of use of assessments and candidates experience. And then to every criticism, use it as an inspiration to write a point in your instructions. Like how much time it's going to take, how is the data going to be used, how it benefits you. There was colleagues of mine, the name will come to me. There were lots of acquisitions in psychometrics, not sure who owns them now, but they did a research piece on what candidates value most in the assessment process, what matters to them most. And they actually found it's not the length of the assessment, it's not gamification. What mattered most is this was relevant to them finding the best job for them. The candidate wants a person to job fit as much as a company wants a person to job fit. So if you can clearly explain how is this relevant for you in ability assessments, to use that you have your skills and abilities which are aligned to performance of key tasks within the role. If you show that your personality assessments to make sure that you benefit most from our working environment. And if you just explain how it's in relevance of their interest and yours, it makes it so much easier because you treat them as an individual and they feel that.
Really, really good point. Let's move on to the second. It's related, but let's touch on it anyway. You mentioned that the nature of the invitation also influenced performance of the people who did take the assessment. So I'm assuming that we have a bunch of people who are just demotivated to do it, whatever it is, and therefore just posted it in, so to say. And that's actually bad data into the system, right? I mean, it's useless. So you got to have like people who are really keen to get into it, I guess.
Completely. I mean, it's not useless. You paid your psychometric publisher. They got paid. So there was some use out of it, but maybe not intended. But the key thing is that, it's how you phrase it. And I mean, I'm not the only one. You probably had this before. A candidate completes the assessments at 11 p.m., though the instruction said, please complete it when you're fresh and not be interrupted. And they write to 11 p.m. saying, can I complete it again? And then you're like, okay, is it going to be disadvantaged to the other candidates? How generous HR will feel tomorrow? It's really important to explain why you need to do this. So don't complete it in the morning, not just complete the assessment in the morning, but so you can perform your best. Make sure you're hydrated, make sure you're not interrupted because the assessments are timed. Also, always give an option for people to share with you any neurodivergence, which might affect their performance on the assessment. And neurodiversity and assessment is a huge thing, both for ability and personality. So when people say to you, oh, personality assessments, they're not affected by neurodiversity. If they say that to you, just let me know, and I have some peer-reviewed articles I'll need to send your way so you can send them. Because it freaking is. That's what the research seems to be indicated to quite a considerable extent. So if you're using cutoff points in the job selection, in personality, you might be naughty and you might be taken to a tribunal. Oh, by the way, top tip. If you have a psychometric publisher that comes up to you and says, look at our shiny stuff, always Google their name next to the word tribunal. You might find some really interesting stuff for your next meeting. So I noticed you had a tribunal last year on your new assessments. How did you action on that? And say, well, So yeah,
Yeah, and I would no, I would never be a vendor in this space. It's like how tough is it? But at the same time, we do need to get better, right? We do need to get better with regards to just assessments generally, because we've come to the point where maybe we're fundamentally dissatisfied with interviews. But let's go to interviews actually, because it is a form of assessment, Nikita. I mean, what's your view of it? I mean, I know it's going to be difficult. You're coming from psychometrics. Obviously, this is your career. But what would you say currently is the main value of doing a one-to-one interview? Like, for this high collaboration intensity group, what do you think are the plus points of doing that exercise, face-to-face interview?
absolutely. To me, it's about the assessment process, and interviews are very much a part of it. So again, it's how it's done. So whether you use assessments or not, but here we come to one of my favorite psychologists, Colin DeYoung. He has a concept called cybernetic Big Five model. You can download it from Google Scholar. It's free. If you have trouble falling asleep, that article might help. But the key thing is, in a recent podcast, he's been said, so what do you do? And he goes, well, I'm a personality psychologist. And yes, when I'm at parties and people find out I'm a psychologist, especially personality psychologists, their first question to me, are you assessing my personality? And he goes, at this point, I need to lie and say no, because of course I'm assessing you. We're assessing each other all the time. This is what humans are like. So in an interview, people also assess the other person's personality. If you have an interview panel, one of the first things to do is to profile them with any assessments you're profiling candidates. And you might find some interesting stuff, such as in the past, I found that you had like this personality psychological twins in interviews panels who wanted to work with each other on interview panels because they always agreed with each other. It's like, oh yeah,
So hang on, a psychological twin is basically someone who has the same psychology profile, and they're just likely to be agreeing with each other on most things, right?
exactly. So you might as well have one of them. You have a panel of three people who have
Mm.
identical kind of, not identical, but very similar personality preference, which are part of their psychological profile. But because of the similarities, they're more likely to basically be an echo chamber of themselves. So first of all, whichever assessments you use, give an experience to your selection panel, as well as actually provide them feedback on assessments. Because, for example, if you're using a Big Five model and the candidate scores high on neuroticism, one interview panelist will go to another one. I told you they were neurotic. They're emotional, which doesn't necessarily mean that. But by giving people an experience of the assessments, you actually make sure they're more educated about them and more likely to interpret them correctly, because a little bit of knowledge is a dangerous thing. And when it comes to this, also there's really fun research about interviewers and their interview styles, what it tells you about them. These big questions people like to ask, how many manhole covers there's in freaking New York, or how many trains there are on London Underground. Basically, when they say, I want to see how they think, there was a research study that shows interviewers who like questions like that score higher on sadistic traits. So, uh,
I do think that's true.
so because sometimes the interview tells you more about the interviewer than the person, and as long as the interviewer is trained, has good experience, doesn't think
Do
they
you know
know.
what? Do you know what, Nikita? You just reminded me because I haven't encountered many of these people, but now that you mention it, I do recall a few hiring managers that I used to deal with who I think they were quite sadistic. Like they embraced recruiting. Like a lot of the times, you're trying to get hiring managers motivated recruiting. They don't want to do it. They're doing it out of obligation or whatever it might be. Some people embraced it. I wonder whether it was like that power dynamic, because let's face it, here's another aspect of why candidate experience is bad, is because there is an asymmetry in terms of power, because the candidate is going forward to be assessed and the interviewer is assessing them, right? In the most cases, leaving aside top level headhunting or whatever, where maybe that's the reverse. But most of the case, if you're a candidate, if you last time you got a job, chances are you were kind of applying and someone else was assessing, and that inherently is bad. Like, show me an experience where being judged is good. Well, I don't like to be judged. No one likes to be judged, right? That's a bad experience. So is kind of experience inherently bad because it is that asymmetry, and we have to accept it as just that's the way it is. Is there a way we can equalize that in some way? What are your thoughts?
Have you had people who were interviewers for the right reasons and were good and supportive and empowering?
No, not in my experience. But I'm going back like in 2010s. This is like pre woke, mate. This is way back when. So I don't know where we're at now. Maybe there is such a figure, but in my personal operating experience, no. I only had reluctant hiring managers and then like over enthusiastic ones.
I see. Well, in this case, they do happen, but it just depends on the person because there is a very kind of unequal power dynamics, and some actors with particular traits might use it to their advantage. Some people might not too. But there's also like, so many stories that you kind of think, are they true or not? Like a hiring manager taking CVs, cutting them in half. Well, no, taking two stack, putting them
Throwing
into
them out,
stacks,
yeah.
throwing one out and say, I don't recruit unlucky ones. Stuff like this. You think it's not there, but you think maybe actually this does happen because this is the state of perception of the industry.
I think that probably has happened as a result of the story being told. So, in other words, people might have been inspired. That story's gone into the culture, and I think it's percolated in. And there's probably a few hiring managers decided, I like that self identity of a person that has that kind of arbitrariness. There we go.
I
Oh,
even worked with companies which are like this. We only hire the top 5% of people who score on a particular ability assessment. And you realize how flawed that ability assessment is. But what effect it has on the company is that everybody thinks they're super smart, where they not necessarily are, because they just score.
mhm.
Maybe it's correlated with some aspects of intelligence, potentially, but they create this culture where only the top 5% on this particular test. I have seen some really weird stuff out there. As I always say, you cannot spell organizational culture without using the word cult, and there's a hint. Some organizations are more cultish than others.
You know what, you make a really important point. Like what's the impact of your assessment to the culture of the company in terms of the people who perceive to have passed the ritual? Because again, let's take the anthropological view of it. You're basically a tribe. You're trying to increase the size of the tribe, and you've got a bunch of people that are auditioning to get in. Okay. Well, what are you saying to the people who make it? What trials are you subjecting them to such that they've made it, and what's the impact that on their future behavior with these trials? We probably don't even think about this at all. Like we kind of isolate the concept of assessment, and we just assume, okay, that's just assessing, but there's cultural impact long after the assessment, and that's something we don't think about at all.
Combine that with cultural values, combine what people are promoted on, combine it what's reinforced, and the more you go to the top, the more it's distilled to its purest form.
The purest form of what that culture is. Nikita, let's talk about feedback, because I've noticed that that's actually the title of this show, and probably
Yeah,
a lot
right.
of people. But yeah, probably a lot of people. I didn't even remember that was what it was. But we're on the same sort of, we're in adjacent conversation. Feedback. Now, I'll confess, I'm really bad at feedback. I'm bad at giving it because I think, oh no, I don't want to offend anyone, and I'm really bad at taking it. It's like, you know what? Don't give me any crap. That's my position. So I'm like, I'm the worst person with feedback. But can you explain the psychology behind why someone like me is bad at this? And how do we get better at, let's say, receiving and giving feedback? Because recruiters need to know this.
There's a nice common point between personality, feedback assessments, all of this. When you're completing a self-report assessment, because psychometrics are really not rocket science, personality. You have a question, are you competitive? You click strongly agree. You score high on the percentile. The report says you're competitive. The coach goes, or person in selection goes, you're a competitive person. The client goes, or the candidate, you know me so well. Really, we haven't improved in 60 freaking years despite billions spent, but that's for a separate conversation. But the key thing is that what you're measuring is a self-narrative, who you think you are. So I call this the self-awareness cake. It's in layers. There's a layer of what you like. So you might be introverted, extroverted, layer of what you do, your behavior, your maladaptive response, and who you aspire to be. So there's 4 layers. And the room of
Hang on. Sorry, Nikita, can you repeat the layers again?
Sure. So there's what you like, so what you enjoy, such as, for example,
Preferences, right?
preferences. So you might be really introverted and you might enjoy your own company, or and very selective people you enjoy socializing with, or you might be highly extroverted. The more company, the better. If anybody tells you introverts are asocial and they're not passionate, complete rubbish. Introverts are just extroverts with good taste. They're just more selective. Then you have every day what you do. So even if you're an extrovert, you can listen. Like I can listen when they pay me. It's correlated. But or if you're an introvert, you can be a great public speaker, but it might take you a bit of energy to do those things. Then there's a stress response when we're under pressure, when we feel exposed, etc. Uh, then there's who you aspire to be. So a couple of years ago, there was a study done that shows that people were asked, "Do you want to change parts of your personality?" 80% said yes. 80% in that study. They wanted to be less neurotic and more extroverted. Like the world needs more extroverts, in my opinion. Anyways, but the key thing is we all have these different parts of us. What we like, what we do too much, who we aspire to be. Another key thing, in a room of 210 people, there's 210 different versions of you. So there's one how you see yourself, and 209 how other people interpret your behavior. And therefore, when we get feedback, it's that moment of interaction between how other people see you and how you see yourself. So if people say, you're doing a good job, and you think you do a good job, you go, good job. If you've done a crap job and people say, you've done a crap job, you go, yeah, I did. I think you can do better, or how can I help? Great. But if you say, I done a good job, and they go, you're crap. What? It's like whenever my partner comes to me and says, Nick, you're being argumentative. My response is, no, I'm not. Or when it's this.
So it's the dissonance between your self-perception and how other people perceive you, and this leads into basically inability to deal with feedback because I don't know, there's a psychological stress point when there's a that scenario where there's dissonance freaks you out essentially.
Exactly. Plus, you throw in communication. Like I have been in workshops when people who worked with each other for decades, one person says yes, and the other person says it's a no then. People can mishear and misinterpret stuff standing next to each other, not to mention global context. By the way, email is a communication behind which people see the worst intention, funnily enough. So even how the feedback is delivered, then you can have personality differences. So for example, if you have a boss who's highly introverted and poker faced, when they go, you've done this can be better, you can see, oh my God, they're so upset with me. But and an extrovert can go, you've done a crap job, and smiling and stuff like this, and go, oh, it wasn't that bad. But the issue that introverted bosses often feel is that the other people take stuff too seriously. The extroverted bosses go, they don't take it too serious. They don't take it seriously enough because they mess up again. There's lots of different variables when it comes to feedback. But here's a small little trick. Same what I use when I meet with clients before I open any psychometric. I go, how would you describe your personality? Because first, I want to see the self-narrative they have of themselves. So before giving feedback, I would ask, how did you think you did on this project? How did this project go for you? What did you like? What can be improved? The issue is that often feedback is not feedback, because I was just chatting with a client today and yesterday. Feedback is only feedback when somebody walks away with an actionable plan on it. If you say somebody needs more gravitas or more emotional intelligence, how will it look like? And in that case, give an example when this person done it well and when it could have been better, and how can they action it? Because unactionable feedback is not feedback, it's just commentary.
It's worse, it's potentially criticism. Maybe that's the difference between feedback and criticism. Criticism is just like an attack. It's a description of your failures. And it's like, oh, thanks. It's like, well, what can I do with this? but you got to give like some stepping stones to improve. That's really, really good. Very, very good indeed. And by the way, folks, do you like that question? I mean, it's when you hear Nikita say it, it suddenly becomes, oh, of course I know this. But how many times do we fail to actually ask the other person how they felt about their own sort of performance? It's like what we're interested in is their own self-narrative. We have a curiosity about that. Okay, we're going to keep going, guys. But before we crack on, and I forgot about this last couple of weeks, but we're not going to forget about today. We have to make sure that we connect with each other, folks, because Brain Food Live is going to come off air in about 15 minutes. And of course, this conversation and conversations like this need to continue going forward, because I'm sure you agree with me, it's hugely enriching. to be participating in that discourse of this type. So the way in which we want to do this is quite simple. You grab your LinkedIn URL and you just share it in the chat stream here on Crowdcast. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, please do the same. Grab your LinkedIn URL, stick it in the comment thread, whichever LinkedIn live stream you're watching it on, and then you just connect with everyone else who's done the same. What's going to happen is people who are interested in this topic, the psychology of candidate experience, psychology of candidate feedback, they'll reveal themselves by putting their LinkedIn URLs in there. Therefore, just connect with them and talk about this topic. You know they care about this. And the bottom line is, everyone's going to walk away with much reinforced networks, social networks, which I think is always socially powerful and psychologically beneficial as well, professionally beneficial also. So go ahead and do that. Okay, Nikita, we're gonna head to questions in about 5 minutes. But before we do that, let's keep talking a little bit more about candidate feedback, receipt of feedback. So I think a lot of people struggle with this, particularly the Brits. I think there's culturally some sort of there's a cultural thing as well. One of the things that the Brits tend to do is like dismiss positive feedback as if it's nothing. They minimize it. Oh, it was nothing. And I'm thinking that's a cultural habit, but is that actually a right thing to do? It's like how do you receive feedback? Positive feedback, how do you receive that? Negative feedback, how do you receive that? Can you give us a couple of examples?
So personality traits play a huge part in it. And culture, of course, is also the effect of this, such as, for example, British culture, stiff upper lip, hide your light under a bushel, tall poppy syndrome, all of this. It's fun to explore this from this side, but some of us have a more negative construct about this. This is actually one of the pillars of neuroticism, is a negative self-construct. So you have this narrative of yourself and you don't like it. That's one of the parts of neuroticism. And because of confirmation bias, if you're really hard on yourself, so things like inner critic, imposter syndrome, like if anybody on this call, if you have imposter syndrome and inner critic, you're more hard on yourself. But I have good news for you. You know what's really good about having inner critic and imposter syndrome? You're unlikely to be a psychopath. Psychopaths don't have that. So next time you're really hard on yourself, you can go, at least I'm not a psychopath. And if you're a psychopath, at least know I don't have an imposter syndrome. So, bright side all around. I nicked it from a client yesterday, that second joke. Then the second thing is just be aware of this bias. So if you get negative feedback, if you have a negative attitude about yourself, you'll immediately look for the negative stuff. It's called confirmation bias. We look for the stuff that's in line with our self-construct. So this is just human. And therefore, when you know this about yourself, just know, okay, I'm going to look at this part, but then make an effort to look at the good side as well. What I do when clients really struggle with this, I go, okay, before our next session, pick up 2 markers, print out your performance reviews, whack, 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 whack. Not that the sound the printer makes anyways, it's been a long week. But then take 2 markers, one with different colors, and with one highlight your strengths, one development areas. And then create a little summary of this. Because one of the key issues, people who don't own their strengths, you know how they show up? Frustrations with others. Because you assume everybody has this. Because when you read the performance review, it's like, really good with ambiguity, but really good with structure. And you go, psh, isn't everybody? Well, first, if it was everybody, maybe it wouldn't be in your performance review. Just saying. But then the issue becomes, because you take this for granted or hide it under a bushel, you look around and you go, Jimmy over there, really good with structure. Sharon over there, very good with chaos. But they cannot do the either. What's wrong with them? Because quite often what frustrates us with others, as far as it's so not obvious to them, is strengths which are unique to us, we are not owning. And that kind of really bites you later on.
Okay, stop press there. That's a really profound point. Thank you, Nikita. And I think everyone immediately understands this. It is probably a personal example right now that flashed across your mind as soon as Nikita mentioned this. When you get outraged that someone can't do this, like you're outraged, like straight outrage. But hey, it's your strength that you still haven't recognized.
And you know what's even better? You'll pair up very likely with somebody who agrees with you. And you go, can you believe they didn't do that? Yeah, I know, right? Confirmation bias kicks in because we're calling with people who agree with us. Like I work a lot in Canary Wharf. And if you go to Canary Wharf, where there's a statistical concentration of investment bankers, if you take out your earpods, you will hear the following conversation, very statistically likely. It will go something like this. I wasn't too harsh, was I? No, they need to learn. Plus, if they think they have it hard, they have no idea how we had it in our 20s. Oh, yeah, I totally agree. Somebody low on agreeableness upsets somebody high on agreeableness, but instead of talking to them, they talk to somebody low on agreeableness. Little do they know the person they upset is a couple of tables down or in the next cafe, talking with somebody like them, going to psychopath we need to work with. Yeah, I know, right? And those two need to work together after a lunch break.
Yeah, and what will happen here is basically it's a self-reinforcing, it's an echo chamber, right? Because you're attracted to, or you attract people that kind of agree with you, and it's more comfortable to do that. And then, of course, ends up sort of reinforcing these things that you have, and they're not necessarily positive. So the bottom line is, if you want to work effectively in team, then these things need to be examined. They can't just be unexamined, sort of a sort of prejudices going forward. Really good, Nikita. We have to go to questions because we've got tons of them. By the way, folks, any more questions for Nikita, do blast away. I'm going to start answering one by one, okay? I'm going to read out the questions so people who are listening to this and not reading it, you'll also be able to participate. We have one called from Michael. Michael said, okay, have you ever seen them used effectively in hiring? Them, I guess, means psychometric. I mean, what's your answer?
Plenty of times. One of the key things that I find organizations which do this well, they have a reflection circle for the candidates after the selection process, and or people who have been hired like 6 to 12 months in. So they kind of reflect how they found the selection process. They also track a lot of data. So, for example, you can track data that candidates with particular kinds of neurodiversity might really struggle with particular questions in your questionnaire because they seem to take longer with it. You might want to re-examine this question. Then you'll have a reflection with people actually reflecting what process they enjoyed, parts of it, what didn't make sense, how they would do better. To me, the key thing is, as far as assessment strategy, put in either reflection groups and data gathering throughout, such as diversity we mentioned before, that you're not reducing it through the process. And it's a process that you can improve year on year on year. Also consider potentially creating your own bespoke assessments if your organization is big enough, rather than using somebody's off the shelves. So you have more creative control as far as you can improve the selection process.
Yeah, I'm going to critique Michael here as well because, and no shade on you, Michael, because this is really early on in the conversation. But this idea that there is a particular effective or ineffective assessment is kind of a bad framing because it's about the entire process that's effective or not. And it's not modular. Basically, it's totally embedded into the process. Okay, let's keep going. We have one from Tony. Tony's saying, what role should in the selection process? What does your profile say about your ability to work together? I don't quite understand the question, but I think it's about, we kind of get it, right? I mean, basically, what role should the assessment play when it comes down to teamwork, ability to work with others?
Fantastic. And as you brought it previously, it's how you fit within a team. So the way I address it, if you have a personality preferences with very strong preferences like high agreeableness, high extroversion, low agreeableness, one of the questions I use in interviews and coaching, and of course you need to use the same questions, I believe, to all candidates, but let's say you have lots of candidates who vary on the agreeableness trait. So I would ask, how do you deal with your opposite? Or what, so for example, I have one example. One dude scored really low neuroticism, really high extroversion, lower agreeableness, a happy chappy, experienced positive emotions a lot, negative emotions very rarely. So I said, how do you deal with your emotionally dynamic colleagues? Because Nikita, it's so simple. I don't know why you ask. When they come to me with their emotions, I tell them two things. One, nobody died. Two, they should grow up. And they go, what if this doesn't work? I just send them to HR. As my friend Paul says, it's very hard to define what emotional intelligence is, but it's very clear when people don't have it. So the thing is that you would look for, let's say, more stronger preferences within your candidate pool, and you see if there's some questions you can construct within the interview process to help you better understand this. But the way I do this with team sessions, I use a tool which kind of looks at the stress response, and I ask people to go stand on qualities they find most difficult to deal in others when working with them. As
Yes.
another wonderful British phrase, Some people bring out the worst in you, some people the best. And sometimes I add, sometimes it's the same people. It's just the day of the week is different.
Yes, very, very good. These are all very educational. I'm finding this very, very interesting, Nikita. Thank you. Okay, we'll have a question from Marta. Marta saying, what do employers use psychometric tests as in? Why do they use psychometric elimination stage when it's very biased and not appropriate to be used? Well, why do they do it then? I guess that's the question. Like, what do you think the employers are getting out of it?
You have 1,000 applicants per place. You only have HR bandwidth for 100.
Yeah,
so you need to sift. You need to sift 900 candidates.
That's it. It's simple application flow management. That's what it's there for. And not good or bad, but that's probably the underlying motivator, right? Okay, which assessments are we speaking about? 16 personalities, DISC. All right, so I guess we've already covered it, Christian. This is we're talking about sort of the big five or something, aren't we?
Well, look, what I'm going to say. So the most interesting part about Christian, scientifically proven. There's not a single assessment that's been scientifically proven. There's not a single thing in psychology which has been scientifically proven. It's been supported by research. That's the best we can do. But we haven't proven scientifically anything. My dad is a professor of applied mathematics and physics. To him, whenever I said psychology is a science, we disagreed with this, but that's probably for my therapy sessions, not for this podcast. But the key thing is that any person who sells you psychometrics, says this is scientifically proven, you can say bye-bye, because they don't know what the hell they're talking about. There's different
or they don't lack the humility to recognize that that they don't have the truth. I mean, these are all just tools, frameworks, methodologies to try and get us a little bit better and give us a bit of information, but there's no established truth to be achieved here.
If you want to see a critical perspective on psychometrics and in use of selection, it's called the book is called Personality Assessments in Employee. Let me just selection. I'm going to find the right title. Personality Testing and Employee Selection: Challenges, Controversies, and Future Directions. So this is written by a guy called Andrew Philip Monroe. I'll just pop it in the chat. Personality testing book.
All right. While you're doing that, we're going to pile through these questions because they're never ending. Okay, we've got Fabina. Fabina saying, what stage is optimal for using psychometrics? If I was going to drop them in, like, is there a preferred place in the hiring funnel?
So what's a psychologist's answer to every question? It depends. So it depends. When do you have the budget, time, money, how many applicants you're dealing with, what are the constraints on the selection process? If you have 1,000 applicants per place, you need something in the beginning, in the first sift. If you're hiring for top roles and you have interviews, all of that stuff, maybe later in the selection process, maybe you need to add some assessments as you go along. It would really depend. But I would highly recommend the Personality Testing book by Monroe. It has a really good critical perspective on this and the issues, because in our hour, we didn't even get to the really kind of questionable stuff about psychometrics and where they come from. Yeah.
Part two, Nikita. Part two. Let's do that. Let's do that.
Publishers don't want you to know. We can call it that.
Yeah, we might have to run that one unsponsored. But
oh, yes.
Okay, Christian, I see your question there. I think we've already answered it because we did talk about team profile, so we're going to move on. Alice has actually written an essay, but let's read it. Okay, you mentioned a psychometric test might reveal more about the personality of the person who designed them rather than the person taking them. I'm wondering, when companies interpret these results, how can they do so in a way that doesn't flatten the individual into a set of traits and scores? How can they use the results without simply measuring how well somebody fits into ideal? Okay, I think I've got my answer, but what's your answer to this?
Right. From my perspective, it's use them lightly. So they can be very informative, but know all the issues that will go with it. So know the technical manual of the assessment, know the issues with it, but also know the biography of the author and when it was created. Such as, for example, somebody mentioned 16PF, I think that's 1949, MBTI is 1944, NEO-PIR is 1985, OPQ is 1980s. A lot of that stuff was created quite a long time ago. So the question is, for example, how those assessments kept up with the time is also really key, because a lot of the psychometric publishers are quite kind of like say that, oh, it's like the author had some insight into the human condition. No, they're all fantastic. It's all written by humans for
Yeah.
now.
And also culturally embedded, right? Like a lot of assessments actually occurred during like really certain moments in time. I mean, wasn't KPIs invented during World War II or something? It was like, you know what I mean? They literally had a military purpose to do a lot of this assessment stuff. So we also got to understand these things are culturally embedded, historically embedded. That these units just appear out of nowhere. Okay. Let's keep going. We've got Stephen Rothberg. Stephen Rothberg, the use of assessments is supposed to improve quality of hire, but when some candidates opt out instead of being assessed, how do we know those that choose to be assessed are of higher quality than those who decided to opt out? I mean, we don't, right?
No, we don't. And this is what's really interesting. So, for example, even if you're sifting from 1,000 to 100, did you sift on the right reasons, or did you sift out the people who would be better at the job than the people who were left? And same with people who drop out. Would they be actually better to do the job as well? This is a key thing why we need to track who drops out and how this funnel actually works. But this is why it's really good right now. We're capturing more and more data, and we can. So make sure you make use of that data. So actually pose those questions to your psychometric providers. See what they can do. Make them sweat.
Yeah, fantastic stuff. And we have a final a question from Kos, and I love this question. It's hi Nikita, I visited your LinkedIn profile. Are you still a practicing stand-up comedian? And that's to your credit, Nikita, because you've kept us entertained as well as educated throughout the course of this 1 hour. I won't take any much more of your time because you've obviously got a weekend to get on with. So I do thank you very much for spending time with us. Folks, obviously Nikita is a fantastic person to follow on LinkedIn. Do make sure you do that. Make sure you connect with him and get involved in some of these meetups. These seem to be educational things,
Sure.
which would be great to know more about. Final thing, before you say something, the next step I want to talk to you about, Nikita, and I think it does set up to part two, is how do we think about candidate psychology in a psychological contract when we start deploying AI agents at them? Like, what is the contract there? And in fact, when candidates themselves deploy AI agents, how does this change the group psychology, the group dynamics of recruitment and assessment? I think that's an interesting one to explore.
I think that's definitely good for part two, but at this point we don't know. So to me, AI is like the invoked Rorschach test. It tells what people see in AI tells you more about the personality of the person than the future of AI. So like the neurotic Sky and openness sees Skynet, while the high agreeableness, low conscientiousness see, oh, it will do our work for us. But to me,
Yeah.
right now, it's too early to tell, but it's really exciting. And talking about this, so first of all, we have a book called Personality: A User's Guide. So I wrote it with Georgy Yankov. So it's kind of, you probably already heard the best jokes. So you have the Amazon link there, also available through Waterstones. And the second thing, if you like this sort of stuff, we have our Psychometric Fest. So this is the first time we're ever going to be doing this. So it's a one-day conference in London. You can stream in. We have fantastic speakers who, let's say, worked on multiple projects to increase neurodiversity through actionable steps. We have people coming from the States presenting newest assessments. We have heads of assessments talking about their assessment strategies. So it's like a huge day geek out on to make the most value out of assessments, independent which ones you use. So we either have a full day in London or you can stream in. And in the evening, we will have SciPub. So it's a free event in London. Anybody can join. We have Tomaso Primuzniak. He wrote Why Incompetent Men Become Leaders, and his current book is Don't Be Yourself. So he'll be presenting this. So this is going to be in central London. The link to the Psychometric Fest is in the chat, Eventbrite. And if you want to know about SciPub and stuff like this, just connect with me, and I'm always happy to have as you can see, a conversation. And I'm still a stand-up comedian. So if you want a stand-up show and personality for your company, let me know. We do it to raise money for charity. So yeah.
Fantastic stuff. I'm going to turn up to this event if I'm still in London. I think I've got a feeling I might be on a flight, but if I'm there, I'll definitely love to turn up. Nikita, thank you very much. Been brilliant having a chat with you. Let's make sure we book in part two in the not too near future. Have a very good weekend, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely weekend. Thank you for your participation.
Nikita Mikhailov, folks. This is why I wanted to do one-to-one with Nikita. Last time we had him on, he was on panel, and it was like, you know what, this guy's got to have stage to himself. Anyway, listen, brilliant as ever. What a wonderful guy, and really educational on a very important topic. How do we assess for candidates? How do we give feedback? How do we improve candidate experience? Lots of really interesting, important points to make. Are we as recruiters betraying the psychological contract to candidates when we ask them to go through our hiring funnel? And if so, how do we correct for that and make that right? Okay, that's about it, folks. I hope you had a very good show. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll be back next week, of course. Make sure you follow the channel if you like this type of conversation. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, just follow my channel there. My page, should I say, I live stream. Whenever I live stream on Crowdcast, I'm also going live on LinkedIn, so you can watch it there as well. Next week, we have a double header. It is Halloween week, so we're going to do it. It's not related to Halloween, but we've got two shows to give you. One on Wednesday, we're going to talk about recruiter enablement. We've got a live demo from our friends down under from Vouch. And on Friday, we have got a Halloween special. It is a Halloween special because we're going to be talking about how to get budget for TA in the AI-enabled era. How do we actually go to the business and say, yeah, I need some money for that? When we've been hearing do more or less 3 years or more. That is the conversation. We're going to bring in Johnny Campbell for us to give us his insight on this. It's going to be really interesting. Make sure you sign up for this, and we'll see you there next week, Wednesday and Friday. All right, that's it.